Welcome to Alchemize Yourself Tarot. I like to think of tarot as less fortune telling and more like energy revealing. When you pull cards, you're not just looking into the future, you're tuning into the present. The tarot speaks in archetypes, symbols, and storylines that mirror our subconscious, our energy field, and sometimes the soul's blueprint. So it's like holding up a mirror to your higher self and asking, what do you need to see right now? So how does the tarot work? Here's my view, my point of view, and everybody has their point of view on the tarot that's worked with it, but I believe it's a tool of helping you to connect with divine wisdom. So basically, it's an access point. It's a translator for your own intuition, especially once you learn the system. And energy attracts energy. So the cards you pull aren't random. They respond to your vibration, your intention, and your soul's purpose. And your soul's questions, things that maybe you're not even aware that need to be revealed to you. So there is a mystical quality, a quantum quality to pulling the cards. So every card becomes a portal, whether it's the Fool card, the Justice card, the King of Swords. Each image is like an initiation, an invitation to deeper understanding. So from a philosophical point of view, I see the tarot as a reflection of the inner alchemical process, a way to work with the subconscious and unconscious layers, and a sacred bridge between the seen and unseen realms, more like a cosmic dialogue between you and the divine. So when you come here for a reading, you're not just doing tarot. You're doing spiritual work, like insight work, activation work. So the tarot works as a symbolic and intuitive tool that can offer insight, clarity, reflection. There are several perspectives on how and why tarot works, depending on your worldview. Psychological, spiritual, or even mystical. But here are some main explanations of why the tarot is so powerful and why it works, regardless of these perspectives. Because from a psychological perspective, it's reflecting your subconscious mind, right? The images themselves speak to the subconscious through archetypes and symbols. These represent human experiences. It's also stimulating your intuition, allowing you to access hidden thoughts, feelings, or desires. The cards can help organize and externalize inner confusion, giving you a clearer path forward, like a mirror for your soul. A lot of people that are drawn to tarot they love psychology, right? Carl Jung believed in synchronicity, and even he believed that tarot could be a way to tap into the collective unconscious. So, you know, even from that point of view, it's a very powerful tool. And you see in psychology and therapies, people, you know, they use imagery to help people work through unconscious patterns. From a spiritual and energetic perspective, from a metaphysical view, tarot taps into spiritual or universal energy. So each card pull is a reflection of your current energetic state or your vibration. Many believe spirit, the universe, ancestors, or the higher self guide the cards. And I believe there's evidence for that. I do feel like there's a synchronistic or kind of a mystical quality to sometimes the cards we pull at times, especially if you're in that headspace when you're working with the cards, when you become a channel for that information. The right cards can come up due to synchronicity, meaningful coincidence that align with your question or your situation. A lot of times you'll pull a card that related to something else that had happened earlier that day, or you'll pull a card and something later that day will happen that's synchronistic to what you're experiencing. So that's where I feel like that mystical quality to reading comes into play. You know, you're asking, your soul is longing for answers to certain questions, and it's like once you open yourself up to that information, you can start to channel it. Also from like a divination, a magical point of view, like in occult or esoteric systems, like Hermeticism, Kabbalah, tarot is part of like a sacred language of symbols connected to the divine structure of reality. So they actually believe it's a language, a system, a structure. So practitioners may use rituals, astrology, numerology, or elemental forces to amplify readings. So tarot can be used in ritualistic work. The belief is that tarot can predict future energies or timelines through but many modern readers see it more as offering potential outcomes than like fixed fates. So it can reveal and I think the whole blueprint thing comes from the fact that there are patterns that get exposed when you're working with tarot. So, yes, in the sense that it can offer powerful insight, the tarot really does work. It can bring insight, clarity, healing, empowerment. It helps many people with decision making, personal growth, spiritual connection. So whether you believe it's psychology, energy, or spirit guiding the cards, what matters most is the meaning and transformation it offers the person receiving the reading. So that's ultimately what you're guided here for, is you want clarity or confirmation or helping you transform a situation. That's when it becomes useful. Instead of just being caught in the pattern, you can break a pattern if it's not working for you. And you can start to create new patterns. So I did pull a spread here. So about what you as the collective may be avoiding. What are you ready to see? And this was interesting because the illusion of what you've been holding on to, and this is a collective reading, so this is just, tapping into that collective energy. The illusion is that there's a perfectly right answer, right? The Justice card implies balance, being fair, being true. I always see justice or judicial systems as being like the mediation between two sides, like finding a balanced and fair answer or outcome for two people. But the fantasy or false comfort is that sometimes justice is a false comfort. Sometimes even if something is fair to one person, it may not be fair to the other person, right? That's how karma works. You can't just insist that somebody deserves a karmic consequence, because we are not able to necessarily see all the variables of the universe and what's fair. What's fair for us might be very unfair for another person. And what you may be refusing to see, or maybe this is something in your energy, something in relation to another person, but what somebody's refusing to see is that it is time to let go of regret, remorse, sorrow, and pain. That maybe something was fair or is fair. At the end of the day, it may have really been painful and hurtful, and it may have seemed unfair, but there is a sort of karmic justice playing out here. So the truth is, it may be time to let something go. Grieve it. There's nothing wrong with grieving it and working through the emotions and the pain. But many of you are getting to the other side. You're starting to understand that it is what it is. And there could be forces beyond your control here, because Hierophant and Justice can be systems and institutions of belief and fairness. You know, there's a difference between the Hierophant, that's more of a spiritual belief system or ideological belief system. The Justice is basically the black and white meaning of the law, but even that's up for interpretation, right? You know, that's why we have people in law to interpret the law from a balanced and fair point of view. The shadow behind the desire is wanting to prove that you're right. So the King of Swords, there's nothing wrong. You know, upright is a very thoughtful, deliberately, rationally minded person. But the shadow, what you're really trying to get from the thing you want is strategy, right? You want something to work out in your favor. So some of you could really be dealing with a legal battle or issue. Maybe somebody that you're dealing with is going through this, but somebody is strategizing. That's the shadow. It's like if you work the system this way, you get the outcome that you want. You know, because King of Swords is like a lawyer or a judge to me. Very discerning, very deliberately, very cold and detached. Like believing, the shadow is believing that there's a cold, detached, black and white here when it comes to truth, right? But there are emotions, right? There are other feelings, there are other variables that may not be considered when it comes to the King of Swords. The King of Swords doesn't necessarily care about your feelings. They're doing what's going to be strategic or right for them, right? They want the best outcome for them. And it's not in reverse. I would say it's more shadow if it's coming off as manipulation. I'm not necessarily seeing that. So I'm not seeing that someone's trying to manipulate it, but they're approaching it from a very cold, detached, deliberate point of view. And the power that you or this person end up giving away when you lose your voice, self-trust, or your fire, is that you try to over-explain. You start to argue with this person, right? Knight of Swords wants to prove a point. It could even be this King of Swords is trying to prove a point. There's all this air energy, right? Like, so I'm getting that there's a debate, maybe even an argument that plays out here about who's right, who's wrong, who deserves what. And it's not necessarily considering the feelings or the emotions behind the decision. It's more of, this is the way it is. This is the way it's going to be. But I feel like you kind of lose your power by arguing with this person, because the Knight of Swords is more reactionary. The King of Swords is very calm, calculated, where the Knight of Swords is in motion, it's reactive. So sometimes we lose our power when we're overly insisting on fairness, truth, something going our way, arguing a point. Sometimes you can even be right about something and argue it to death, or it's like you're still not going to get anywhere sometimes with a person that's already penciled out everything that they think is true in the situation, especially if it's legal. Like, this is printed out, this is the black and white print on the paper. The King of Swords is with justice, is very much about holding to a contract or an agreement. This is somebody that lives by contracts. They don't live by, because the Five of Cups and the Knight of Swords is more reactionary, emotional. Because Knight of Swords is air with air. It's all air, almost to the point of overthinking. But it's coming from a place of feeling hurt, feeling like something, well, that's not fair. There's other ways to see it. And quite possibly there are other ways of seeing something. That's the tricky thing. But the truth setting you free is that you just have very different beliefs from this person. Hierophant in the reverse it's unorthodox. It's not, it's breaking away from tradition. It's not about, it's differences in spiritual beliefs. So sometimes your spiritual beliefs will not align with somebody's just black and white views of the law, what's fair, just, or legal, or the law, right? You can't go into a courtroom and, you can, depending on what it is, but it's not based on your faith, your religion, that sort of thing. It's more about the black and white legalities of the law, right? It doesn't matter, depending on your culture and the time. And we could go there, debate that, because a lot of times the lines between the legal system and traditional cultural belief system are blurred, right? A lot of times in many cultures that are theocracies, a lot of times the spiritual beliefs of a culture really do affect the actual way the law works, the government works. But I think there's the truth that's shining through here is that something isn't about that. Also, this is somebody breaking away from a spiritual soul tie. I'm getting possibly a divorce or something of that nature. There's traditional beliefs associated, but when you get married, there's also a marriage license contract, legal issues involved with that as well. So you could already be out of it from a spiritual point of view, but still having to work through the details from a legal point of view. That's a really good example, because even marriage there's a spiritual element, maybe even a soul contract element to it, as well as whatever, the justice of the peace, you still have to go through that process. So I definitely think that it's important to stay grounded in a situation like this, not try to over-explain yourself or try to prove a point, because I think it's going to come more from a place of emotion and this could create more misunderstandings, right? When you're reactionary, you're being called to stay more grounded, more detached. Knight of Swords isn't always detached. They're thinking, and they got hurt. So wherever you're showing up here. That's basically what I'm getting here. And I'll go a little bit deeper. And this may or may not resonate with you. And also, like, when you're dealing with people in relationships, just know that sometimes there is kind of a cold, calculated truth beneath what you're feeling. I think that's a lesson from a reading like this is don't try to over-explain yourself from the point of view of how you feel in every situation. Yeah, it's important to stay balanced, because I think there's a lot of fiery heat, a lot of conflict that may have went down here. And it's like Temperance is here to guide you into balance, at least inner balance, and having patience and thoughtfulness before you act or react to something. So the illusion is that whether or not something's fair, right? And this could involve long-term stability and growth. The tree is all something that's deep-rooted. And sometimes, like the Seven of Hearts is like the Seven of Cups, sometimes we have fantasies and illusions about what we've grown. The tree also represents health and longevity. Definitely something in regards to your growth, what's fair and balanced when it comes to your long-term stability here. But there's illusions about that. And also, something is deep-rooted. It's not shallow. Something goes a lot deeper than the surface. And what you may be refusing to see, some of you are over it, or another person is over it when they don't have any feelings. And that can be hurtful too, is realizing that somebody just doesn't care. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care anymore. What you're refusing to see is someone's not budging. You can argue till the cows come home with this person. They are not budging, right? Somebody is actually, I'm getting even with that Knight of Swords, with that whip, somebody's going to take it as far as it needs to go, right? The whip is about arguments, fighting, not budging, a lot of anxiety. Someone's not willing to let go. Someone could also be holding a grudge there with that anchor and the Nine of Swords. It's like you're either wanting to be set free and somebody's not wanting to let go. That could be it. Somebody's not wanting to let go of something. They want to keep arguing about it because they're feeling a certain way. Because the anchor can be about being anchored and rooted, and that can be a double-edged sword, right? This double-edged sword is, it's great to be anchored and rooted, but it's also keeping you stuck in like a karmic argument, an emotionally based argument. And the shadow is definitely somebody here not budging. Yeah, communication. It is all about communication. And with the Seven of Pentacles, it's like this is about long-term investment, being patient. It's about having a harvest, definitely splitting up assets. There's communication here. Somebody's not going to be happy about. And the power that's being given away is someone's mad, right? The whip, I'm getting, but the Nine of Swords is upright. I do think there is possibly a misunderstanding or a misalignment of truth. You know, your truth isn't going to be their truth and vice versa. So it's true from a certain point of view with the Knight of Swords. But the power is being given away because somebody's starting to react or get angry about ending something and moving on. So it's like there's an agitation here. The ship is all about moving on. Ten of Swords would be about ending something. breaking away, wanting to be set free, because the ship is in motion. The anchor is holding that ship down. Someone wants to pull up anchor and move on, right? That ship doesn't, once it's time to move on and travel and go on with your soul's journey, you gotta lift up the anchor. And something's over. I'm getting that someone could be wanting to hold on to the belief, the traditional belief that they're still anchored to somebody. Well, this is the family, this is, you know, and yeah, divorce situations work out that. You have family, you have beliefs, and this would be breaking those beliefs. And the justice would be about, well, this is what's going on, it's in writing, right? It's more of that sort of thing. And sometimes it takes a while to untangle yourself from like the actual belief system, to break away from that. Yeah, the snake. The truth is that somebody's a snake. They're karmically attached. And you may not see this or know this with the clouds. You have the King and the Queen of Wands, by the way. This is a very explosive kind of dynamic, right? It's like the fire duo. But see, the Queen of Wands has that water. I'm getting like a feminine energy here that's not, you know, maybe trying to tempt or seduce. I mean, the snake is needing to go through that transformation spiritually in order to break away from that soul tie, that belief system, and arguing. So whether you're masculine or feminine, it could go either way. Sometimes, you know, masculines can dip into their feminine energy, like the distorted feminine, back to that Carl Jung, the anima, the animus. Sometimes masculines can be in that vibration, right? Reactionary too. So can feminines. But what's happening here is those emotions are getting slippery. Someone's going to come in and try to tempt or seduce somebody out of what's fair or right. That's when it becomes low vibrational. That's when you're not keeping your vibration high. You're slipping into more slippery means to get what you want. And it's creating confusion with the clouds. Confusion about, is something over, right? Because somebody may not want something to be over. You know, someone fell out of love, wanted something to be over. But let's go deeper into this vibration, because I think it's so important to understand your vibration, how you come into situations. And this goes back to the tarot, the truth, you know, unraveling what is going on beneath the surface. Seems like we kind of went on a tangent, but this is interesting because I wasn't expecting. The higher your vibration, the more light you hold. So maybe that's what's been needing to be revealed here too. The higher your vibration, the more light you're going to be. It's going to you're not going to try to struggle, right? You're not going to continue to argue or beat a dead horse here. You have to know when it's time. I think that's it too. Knowing when it's time to move on and not continue this fight. Knowing when to let go. That's a spiritual lesson that we have to go through. I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to elevate and be set free, you gotta find a way to come to a fair agreement with somebody and be willing to let go. So everything in the universe vibrates at different frequencies. These vibrations separate you from the unseen realms of your life, but the higher your vibration, the closer your connection to these other dimensions which support you in evolution. So we're not going to go crazy deep into that, but you don't want to go lower into the shadow of a situation. That's the message I'm getting here. So, yeah, the tarot is powerful in revealing stuff like this when you're asking it the right questions and you're able to tap into the current energies. And maybe some of you are going through a very intense dynamic where, and that's part of your transformation too, is how to change, how to unroot or unanchor yourself from situations. Somebody's vibrating up and someone here is wanting to come back and pull back, right? Because this is somebody wanting to kind of ascend with the ship. This is the energy that's wanting to hold you back, right? And there's a transformation here. Whatever the karmic energy, they're needing to shed the old skin. That's the test. Are you willing to transmute that, shed that, cut the chain or the cord, right? Not continue the karmic pattern. So, yeah, please like, share, subscribe. We'll go into the tarot. That's what I'm doing here. And I wish you the best of luck as you guys go through your journeys and your transformations. That's exciting to me. It is intense. It's hard inner work. And the tarot is a tool to help you get through that. Bye.